Hi, I'm Maya, and today I want to talk about my favorite Jane Austen and Austen-inspired books. So first I want to talk about my top 3 favorite Jane Austen novels, which of course has to include Pride and Prejudice because it's just the best. So I have read Pride and Prejudice probably 5 times, maybe more. It's just a classic and it's hard to beat the banter and the hate to love plot between Lizzie and Darcy. And the family dynamics are just so much fun with Jane and the other sisters and Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet. They're just such iconic characters that really stick in your head and you feel like you know them. I love Pride and Prejudice because it's so funny. I love Mr. Collins, and he's just such a strange man, such a strange character that brings a lot of cringy moments, but also a lot of laughter to the book. I love the secondary love story between Jane and Mr. Bingley. I think they're just so sweet and adorable and just the most perfect angelic couple ever. I love what a scoundrel Wickham is, and his story is so infuriating to read, but then it's also so satisfying to see how Darcy puts him in this place. And of course, Darcy's growth is something that's also very satisfying to watch. At the beginning, he's really frustrating, but I love to see how he matures and becomes the person that he needs to be for Elizabeth. There's a reason that Pride and Prejudice is considered a classic. There's a reason that it's studied in school. And I think that reason is that it does a very good job of exploring human nature. The dialogue is so fresh and witty, the plot is universal, and that's why there have been so many adaptations of it in books and movies. Austen is brilliant at explaining how the human mind works and the way that feelings are hurt and the way that family members, friends, acquaintances, strangers all interact with each other. She's so good at subtlety. She's so good at describing different personalities and the way that those personalities interact and clash. Pride and Prejudice is also a good exploration of class systems and how people are treated differently when they have more money than other people. And also how, in the Regency era, women completely relied on men for their livelihood, and marriage was a way to guarantee survival. But I think what I love most about Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen in general is that even though the book and Austen are aware that many marriages are just a business proposition, that there can be moments of love, and marriage can be a beautiful refuge from the world and a beautiful way to unite with someone that really completes you. I love that even though there are hardships and struggles in Austen's novels, the ending is always happy, and I think that's just very satisfying and comforting. I think the reason that it's so easy to read Pride and Prejudice over and over again is because you really want the characters to end up together and you're cheering them on the whole way and you're just excited when those moments that you know so well show up again. You never get tired of it because she's so good at suspense and just leading up to that climax. And of course, you can't beat the swoony quotes like "I love you most ardently." I think what's great about Pride and Prejudice is that it has that cutting edge, that snarkiness, that sarcasticness, but then it also has the dreamy, sublime, romantic aspects. So it's perfect for both cynics and romantics. Elizabeth is such an inspiring heroine. I love how she stands up for herself. I love how she speaks her mind. My car is actually named after her. I think she's just a wonder of a woman. And one of my favorite quotes from Pride and Prejudice is, "People themselves alter so much that there is something new to be discovered in them forever." And that's something that I've observed as I've gone through life, that there's always more to people than you thought. You're always learning more about the people in your life. And that's what keeps life exciting and interesting. So that's all I'm going to say about Pride and Prejudice, and now I want to talk about Emma, which is another one of my favorites. So Emma as a character is very frustrating, but I love her arc. And Mr. Knightley is my favorite of Jane Austen's men. I love how he helps Emma become a better person. I love how compassionate he is and how he cares about other people. I love how he defends people that need defending, like Miss Bates. And I love how he rescues people who need rescuing, like Harriet. I love how he sees that there's a need and then he takes care of it. I love that he's a man of action. He's just a good, inspiring person, and that's why I love him. I think Mr. Woodhouse, Emma's father, is a very funny character. I love how much sympathy he has for Miss Taylor. And I think it's very sweet how he doesn't want Emma to leave him. I really like the friendship between Emma and Harriet. I love how Harriet just kind of starts out as a project for Emma, but eventually becomes a person that she cares very deeply about. I think Jane Austen is very good at describing female friendships. That pops up in Pride and Prejudice as well, with the friendship between Lizzie and Charlotte, and how Lizzie has to learn to be more understanding of Charlotte's situation and not judge her, even though Charlotte is making decisions that Lizzie wouldn't have. And similarly, Emma has to learn to not judge Harriet and her choice of spouse. Emma is very spoiled, but I love how she learns to be more appreciative of her blessings. I think my favorite line in Emma is, "If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more." It's so good. And I think it fully captures that overwhelming feeling of love and how hard it is to put love into words. I love how Emma and Mr. Knightley's relationship is different from Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy's relationship. I love how instead of starting out as enemies, even though they do have their disagreements, I like that Emma and Mr. Knightley start out as friends, that they've known each other for a long time, and then that eventually leads to love. I think in Emma, Jane Austen does a good job of creating characters who are very annoying. And annoying people are just a part of life for some reason. I don't know why they need to be, but they are. And I think Jane Austen is good at giving people characteristics and making them say things and do things that are just universally annoying, like Mr. Elton and his wife. I also like how there are more mysterious characters who turn out to be something that you weren't expecting, like Frank Churchill, because that also happens a lot in life, where you think a person is one thing, but then they reveal their true colors. And it isn't always dramatic and horrible, like Frank Churchill isn't a bad person per se, but he's still not what Emma was hoping he would be. And sometimes that just happens in life. There are people that you think are going to be around for a while and are going to be significant to your life, but then they end up not being that. And that's okay. I think in each of her novels, Jane Austen creates such a lush cast of characters. Every single one of them is interesting and you want to learn more about them. And they all work so well together as an ensemble to create a compelling story. And that's especially true in Emma. Okay, so Pride and Prejudice was my first favorite, Emma is my second favorite, and my third favorite Jane Austen novel is Northanger Abbey. I love that it's a spoof on the Gothic novel. I love how Catherine is obsessed with the Gothic aesthetic, and I love how she scares herself by expecting things to go bump in the night when they don't really. Northanger Abbey is a laugh out loud book. I like that Catherine comes from a big family, and I like how she's trying to prove herself as a heroine, trying to stand out from her siblings and trying to be her own woman. I think that Mr. Tilney is a really good character. I don't like him as much as I like Mr. Darcy or Mr. Knightley, but I still think he is a good match for Catherine because he has more of a firm grasp on reality and he has a good head on his shoulders. So he can help guide Catherine and keep her grounded. I also love that Tilney knows a lot about muslin and dresses. That's pretty impressive for a man. I really like their flirting scenes. I think they're really well done. I think Northanger Abbey would be really good in a modern day adaptation. I don't think I've seen one of those, but so many of the situations and circumstances line up really well. Like there's a scene where Catherine is in a carriage and someone's walking by that she wants to talk to, but then the carriage speeds off and she's telling the people in the carriage, hey, wait, I want to go back, and they won't listen to her and they just keep going. And that could very easily be translated to modern day with the same situation in a car. Northanger Abbey is just a fun book. There's nothing too serious or heavy in it, and I think that's why I like it. Because although I do like serious, heavy books, sometimes it's just fun and refreshing to have a light story that just makes you laugh and helps you have a good time. Even the love story itself isn't very dramatic. Tilney doesn't start to like Catherine until he learns that Catherine likes him, which I think is very realistic. It's not very romantic, but it's also just the case for a lot of relationships in the world. So it doesn't have a dramatic, sweeping love like Pride and Prejudice, or a deep, slow-burning love like Emma. It just has a fun, basic, flirty type of love. It's a quick read, it's a satisfying read, and it's also very clever in the way that it turns different Gothic tropes on its head. Jane Austen clearly knows the Gothic genre very well, and so she's able to subvert it which is a testament to what a fantastic writer she is. So those are my top 3 Jane Austen novels, and now I want to talk about my favorite Austen-inspired books. So I have one that is more well known and one that I don't think is as well known in the Austen community. So the first one is Austenland by Shannon Hale. Austenland is just a treat. It's very small and just a delight from start to finish. The main character, Jane, describes all of her past relationships and boyfriends, and it's just so funny to read. I think Miss Charming is one of the best characters ever, just hilarious. Jane frustrates me in the way that Emma frustrates me in just being stubborn and making decisions that she shouldn't. But in the end, everything works out, of course. I think it's a really clever concept. So Jane, the main character, goes to a place where they're basically just LARPing as Jane Austen characters. They wear Regency era clothes and eat Regency era meals at a Regency era estate. And that's definitely something I would like to do, and I think most Austen fans would also like to. There are actors there that pretend to fall in love with you, but then Jane actually does fall in love. So it's just a perfect setup. It's fun and fluffy, but it also has a good warning about not letting your feelings get the best of you and not letting charming, attractive people sweep you off your feet. Because Jane gets misled by one man, but then ends up with another one who is much better. And the guy who she ends up with is sweet and thoughtful, and there's more depth to him than the other man. Shannon Hale is obviously a fan of Austen, and so her homage to her is very respectful and well done. So the character that sweeps Jane off her feet is a lot like Wickham or Churchill or any of the other men in Austen novels who range from villain to just a guy who isn't ready to commit, or a guy who just likes to flirt and there's no real meaning or feeling behind it. It feels like a chick flick, and there is a movie based on it. And it's definitely different from the book, but it's still a lot of fun and really funny. So yeah, if you haven't read Austenland and you're a fan of Austen, definitely give it a read. Okay, and the other book that I want to talk about that is inspired by Jane Austen, and I don't think is as well known as Austenland, is Prom and Prejudice by Elizabeth Yulberg. I got this book at a book fair in like middle school, and I absolutely loved it. It is a perfect retelling of Pride and Prejudice in modern day, but there are also enough differences for it to feel like a new story and not like you're just rereading Austen's work. In this book, Lizzie is a pianist, and her piano playing plays a really big role in the plot. And Jane isn't her sister, she's her best friend. It takes place at a private school where Lizzie is a scholarship student, and so all of the rich kids who are not on scholarship look down on Lizzie. And Lizzie looks down on them for being shallow and superficial, but she misjudges many of them who actually are very kind people despite their wealth. So instead about getting a marriage proposal, this book is about getting a prom date. And because the stakes aren't as serious, it makes it even more lighthearted and fun. Mr. Darcy, or Will as he's called in this book, has a really sweet relationship with his little sister that I love. And it's sweet to see how the little sister, Georgie, she's called in this book, kind of helps Will and Lizzie get together through some manipulation because she knows they'll be great together. I love all of the subtle misunderstandings between Lizzie and Will and how they think that the other person doesn't like them when in fact they're madly in love with them. That dramatic irony is always so fun for me as a reader. One thing that's interesting is that the Catherine de Bourgh character, who's called Kat, is just another student at the boarding school, and so her role isn't as important as it is in the original Pride and Prejudice, which I think is a good change. Because since Kat isn't an adult, she can have more of that mean girl aura to her, and she can orchestrate pranks on Lizzie that make her feel like an outsider, and just help create that more high school atmosphere to this retelling. Like Pride and Prejudice, Prom and Prejudice is about first impressions and misunderstandings, and learning to love people after coming to know them better. The ending is so romantic and lovely. I haven't read it in a while, but I still remember the feelings that I had when I read it, and I think I might reread it. Okay, so those are my favorite Jane Austen novels and my favorite Austen-inspired books. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching.